Hi there, hope you're all having a great day. This video is going to discuss all the musical things of note and do a little bit of analysis on the music of George Formby. For those of you who don't know, George Formby was a British ukulele player around in the 1930s and 40s, that kind of era, famous for songs like When I'm Cleaning Windows and Leaning on a Lamppost. I'm going to be discussing some of the more interesting musical ideas that are present within Formby's work. This is just an artist focus in this video. If you're interested in seeing more general theoretical videos, please subscribe to my channel where I'll be releasing lots more theory videos in the coming months. The first thing I'm going to talk about then is George Formby's use of harmony, that is what he actually does on the ukulele. The harmony he uses is very reminiscent and is very inspired by the music, the Dixieland music and the trad jazz music of the 1910s and 20s. That sort of tradition survived into the 30s and 40s. Most of Formby's chord progressions focus around the concept of the perfect cadence. A perfect cadence is simply put a really strong two-chord progression that is used to close a piece or a phrase. The two chords are called 1 and 5, or tonic and dominant, respectively. The 1 chord is the chord in which the key of the song is based, so in the key of C, 1 is C major, and to calculate chord 5 we simply have to look at the chord 5 notes away from C, which in this case is G major. In a perfect cadence, the dominant chord always comes first, and then we have the chord 1 afterwards. It's always that way round, it's never 1 then 5, for a perfect cadence anyway. You may have noticed that a lot of sections in a song end on a G to C progression, such as this classic George Formby ending, A flat 7, G7, C. This is the perfect cadence in action. If we were to end a song on the A flat 7, for example, the piece would sound awkward and unfinished, but continuing with the G7 and then the C helps the listener feel more at ease with the conclusion. The same can be said for songs in F, where the 5 chord is C or C7. The reason that I'm even bringing this up at all is that the perfect cadence is such a strong idea that it appears throughout pretty much all of Western music, all the way from Bach in the 1600s all the way to the present day, and the perfect cadence can be found in any genre, any style, just a chord 5 to 1 progression. In jazz in particular though, the idea is taken somewhat further and expanded upon by composers sort of starting around from the 10s and 20s. What composers will often do is that they will fill a song with perfect cadences, this strong harmonic force that rounds everything off nicely. To make it sound more interesting though, instead of constantly alternating between 1 and 5, they use 5 of 5, so that is to say chord 5 of chord 5, or the dominant of the dominant. This concept is called the secondary dominant. Let me explain. If we pretend for a moment that chord 5, in this case G, is a chord 1, then what would its dominant chord be? Well, 5 steps away is D. So the dominant of G is D. If we put this back into the key of C again, this gives us the progression D, G, C, also known as 2-5-1. Therefore, we essentially have 2 perfect cadences back to back, creating a really nice and smooth progression that it feels like it has a natural direction. You may recognise this in songs like The Wigan Boat Express or When I'm Cleaning Windows. We can take this idea further though, and think, what is the dominant of the dominant of the dominant? What is D's chord 5? It's A, so you can have the progression which goes 6-2-5-1, or A, D, G, C, as seen in songs by Formby such as I Don't Like. And the dominant of A? It's E, as seen in the progression 3-6-2-5-1, that would be E, A, D, G, C. And this can be seen in the chorus to When I'm Cleaning Windows, or in that other famous tune 5'2" that I'm sure you've come across. And what's the dominant of E? B, and so this continues. Theoretically, you could even keep going and going and going and going, and you would eventually end up back to where you started, as this circle of fifths diagram shows. However, most artists, like Formby and his composers, often make the decision to only use a handful of these secondary dominant progressions to keep things simple. Despite the fact that most of Formby's songs feature these secondary dominant progressions, other chords Formby will use fall outside of this trend, such as the use of chord 4. In the key of C, chord 4 is F, and in the key of F, it's B flat. Chord 4 is deemed the strongest chord after 5, and when we go 4 to 1, it's called a plagal cadence. So it's like a perfect cadence, which is 5 to 1, but it's called plagal when it's called 4 to 1. He also uses a flat 6 chord. In the key of C, this is A flat. Normally we would expect a normal 6 chord to be an A, but the use of the A flat has its own appeal too, and is common in lots of jazz music. Another example we can use is the classic ending of A flat 7, G7, C. More rarely used chords include the Neapolitan chord, which is also known as a flat 2 chord. The Neapolitan chord isn't just a flat 2 chord though, as it has to be in a minor key and it has to precede a chord 5. This appears in Out in the Middle East by Formby, where a G flat chord is used before a C, and then which is the 5 chord, and then an F minor, which is that one tonic chord in the key of F minor. The Neapolitan chord gets its name from where it originated. The technique originated in Naples and was used a lot in classical music, such as Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven. It's a nice alternative chord. It doesn't appear much, but when it does, it really stands out and has a strong effect as something quite different and striking. Now, typically the majority of Formby chords used are 7th chords. What this means is that in a progression almost all the songs are something 7, be it E7 or A7 or D7, B7. The tonic chord is usually the only chord not to be a 7th chord, and it's just a normal triad, a normal major or minor chord. The addition of the 7th creates a dissonance to the chord, which means that the chord is sort of unstable in a way. It isn't resolved, and there is a desire for the chord to move on and go somewhere. This helps create a momentum in the piece, which keeps the song going and flowing through that progression of fifths that we talked about earlier. These chords are very common in jazz music, and in fact in other areas of the genre the numbers can go as high as 13, but in the case of George Formby we don't go beyond the number 7, because that's what Formby did. His limit was 7. For example, a 7th chord is like C7, is where you take the note that is 7 away from the note that the chord is named after, and you add that to the normal major or minor triad. So if you take a C major triad and you have the note that is 7 away from C, that's B, you add that to a normal C chord and you get a C7. We normally play this as a B flat though, creating what's called a dominant 7 sound. And that's pretty much the harmonic backbone of all Formby's music. The harmonic forces behind his songs are pretty standard for jazz pieces, as we've discussed. And although I'm not saying that Formby was perhaps particularly aware of the exact technical names of all these concepts that I've discussed, I'm sure he would have at least noticed some of the patterns appearing in his songs, which would have led the way to future compositions. The next topic I will cover is his use of key signatures. In his last television broadcast, The Friday Show, Formby explains that he can only play in 2 keys. He also admits that he dropped school from the age of 8, which may explain his lack of musical education, given that the statement about playing in 2 keys isn't actually entirely accurate. When looking at Formby's chords, he generally only plays in 2 voicings. He plays in C and F, that is what the chords would be called on a ukulele tuned in C. But of course, as we know, we can tune instruments higher, so that what was a C can become a D or an E or an E flat or anything like that. But the point is the shapes stay the same, and those shapes are called voicings. For example, when I'm cleaning windows, uses the C voicing shapes, despite being in, I think, the key of A or possibly B flat, something like that. Formby does this because he prefers the two voicings, simply put, and if he wants to be in a key other than C or F, he will keep the voicings the same and simply transpose the song by playing the song on a ukulele that's tuned in a different key. Voicings, each voicing has its own characteristic, its own qualities about it that make it unique, and in the voicings that apply to the C and F in C tuning voicings, the way those voicings sort of work around the split stroke are clearly what Formby preferred, and he didn't like, say for example, B flat voicings or G voicings, which is why he would always tune his ukulele differently instead of just playing the chords required in a different voicing, if that makes sense. For example, it would be very difficult to do the split stroke over a B flat chord, especially for an extended period of time. Trying to tap that finger on the A string is obviously very difficult. So he avoids the B flat by, so if he wants to play in the key of B flat, he would tune the uke so that the C voicing would sound as B flat. That said, subsequent players like Billy Uke Scott or Andy Eastwood have made the split stroke work in new voicings, such as the use of the G voicing in this clip. To round up this video, here are just a few more miscellaneous points that we need to cover. I think it can be said that Formby's melodies are quite typically simple. They may be catchy, but they're not exactly rhythmically complex. The focus of the songs is really on the comedic lyrics, so the simple melodies won't distract from the lyrical intricacies that Formby sings. This can differ to instrumental music, where a lack of lyrics is compensated for with more complex melodies. Additionally, the use of structure is important for the same reason. Formby's lyrics are structured in either an AABA, also known as verse-verse, chorus-verse, or in one long repeated dialogue chunk. This is easy to follow and helps the listener engage and follow the musical story. And that pretty much concludes this little crash course on George Formby musical analysis. If there's anything else you'd like me to explain that you think I might have left out, I'm more than happy to do a part 2 to this video. If that comes along, make sure you're subscribed to this channel to see when that comes along. Other things you can find on my channel are more theory videos and some performing videos as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.